Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just a few preliminary intimations. My name is Ken Abraham. I'm a senior solicitor with the local authority. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website. For those at home viewing the webcast, I would like to inform you that if you look above the video, you will see a resources tab. If you wish to select this, and a link to the agenda will then appear in the right hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in a PDF format and follow the discussion and debate that will be ongoing. The role of the chair this morning is to ensure that the committee runs smoothly, having regards to the procedure, behaviour and ethics, which is related to the council. Having said all that, can I now ask those three councillor members for nominations for chair for the meeting this morning?
Can I nominate Councillor Andrew Hodson?
Seconded by myself.
Thank you very much. Then Councillor Hodson, there's no objection, is in the chair.
Okay, thank you. Just let me tick a few boxes here. Right, first of all, I will explain to everybody what's going to happen. We've just got to go through a few more procedures first. Okay, so if I can just introduce myself, I'm Councillor Andrew Hodson, who normally chairs these meetings. Okay, we have, and each officer will put their hand up as I read out the name. You've got Ken Abrams, who you've just been introduced to, who's the Borough Solicitor. We have Margaret O'Donnell, who's the Chief Licensing Officer. We have Anne Beecham. I don't know if she's on camera, but she's taking the minutes. We've got Richard Leyland, who will be coming on later. He's another officer for licensing. We have Bryn Griffiths, who facilitates this meeting. And he won't be acting like the lady in Horsefoot or wherever it was in Cheshire was knocking everybody out because she wasn't right doing that. I'll let everybody know that she was in the wrong for doing that. I have myself, Andrew Hodson, who I've introduced. We have Dave Mitchell, who's on the committee, and we have Councillor Karl Greaney's on the committee. So what I will ask now is for anybody who is not talking, just the three councillors leave their cameras on. If everyone else can switch off, please, because it helps with the signal. And I'll invite you on as you can. Okay. Right. Are there any declarations of interest? I haven't any.
No, none.
No, neither me, no.
Right. Can you just, I'll have to go back again now. All of those who are members of the public who are here, put your cameras back on. This is a good practice for you. Right. We have here Mr. Simon Trout, is that correct? Are you a resident? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm a resident, 22 Church Road, and I introduced my wife, Ruth.
Hang on a sec. So it's Simon Trout.
Yeah.
And what's your name, dear?
Ruth Trout.
And you're representing?
I'm representing Brenda McLeod.
Will you be wanting to speak later?
I'm hoping that
one of you be going to speak later?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. We have Joe Webster. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you a resident?
My parents live directly above the premises.
Okay, yeah, I've read your thing about that. Yeah, okay. We have Mr. Daglish, is it? Hugh
Yes.
Daglish. Have I pronounced it right? Daglish?
Yes, well done. Yes, Hugh and Val Daglish. We make
that-
a representation. We live nearby.
Okay, we had training yesterday, so we were told how to spell how to say your name.
Thank you.
Is that your daughter next to you?
Yes, that's right. No, my wife.
No, sorry about that. What's your name, please?
Val.
Wow.
Val. And will you be speaking, Mr. Daglish?
Only if
Possibly.
Our points are not covered, and
Okay.
very briefly.
Okay. Richard Vivian, you're the acoustics guy, I see.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Who are you here for, the applicants or the...
I'm here for residents.
for the residents, okay? And James Daglish,
Yes, good morning.
you're a solicitor, aren't you,
I-
that's representing?
I am indeed. Mr. and Mrs. Totty, Joe Webster and Denise Bailey have asked me to speak for them.
Are you related to Hugh and Val?
I am, yes, but no
Okay.
relation to Sir Kenny.
No. Please don't take this question the wrong way, but is this what your expertise is in licensing?
It is, yes.
So you've sat on one of these meetings before?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That helps us actually. Okay. Is there anybody else there that we haven't got?
Yes, Jenny Bacali.
Jenny,
Bacali.
I can't hear the second name.
Bacali. Bakkali.
Yeah, I've got it now. Yeah, I remember when I saw this on the statement. Okay, anybody else?
Chair, we just have the applicant, if that's
Right.
okay.
Where are they?
Yeah, we'll come back onto camera now. Yeah, we're here.
Have you got your camera on? Ah, right.
Yeah, we realised it was off. Yeah, I've just put it back on.
And you're Warren and Jamie.
Yeah, Warren Norton, Jamie McLaren.
Warren?
Norton, Norton.
Yeah, and?
Jamie McIlhatton. Do you want me to spell it out?
Yes, please.
McIlhatton.
That's all right, thank you. Okay, camera's off. The only reason is it makes the signal better if we just like the three councillors on. So Mr. Vivian, if you can switch off for the moment, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, it's Simon Trout here. We were expecting Alison Wright to be on as well.
Yes.
Excuse me, Chair, I was just about to say that I've been calling her in. Oh, here she is now.
Hi, I'm here.
Alison.
Yes,
You're
hi.
Councillor Wright.
Yes, I'm
fine. You here. Jeff Green has submitted a speech through, and Margaret O'Donnell's going to read that after you've made your statement. Okay.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is that everybody? Okay. Right. Well, I just have a few things to say now. If you can just switch off, Alison. The chair. I've identified all the people who are here now. There's no one missed out. Hopefully. Got all the rows. Yes. Can you confirm at the moment, Margaret? But before you do that, I would want to tell everybody that we have done lots of these meetings like this now. We do have little hiccups, but we always rectify it as we're going along. We do everything legally. I will give everybody the opportunity to speak, so don't worry. What I would suggest to the residents is that you have a pencil and paper next to you. If there's something that's said, which I'm sure there will be, that you don't agree with, write it down and you can bring it up when it's your turn to speak, because we don't let people cut in across each other. It would never work if we allow that. So please be prepared to write your questions down, and I will give you the opportunity to speak throughout the course of the meeting, so don't worry about that. Okay. Right, Margaret, can you just confirm that the licensing authority has sent and received all the appropriate notices and supported documentation?
Yes, Chair, I can confirm that. I can also confirm that there has been a number of pieces of documentation that have been submitted, both by the applicant and by local residents, which have been served upon yourself and where appropriately, obviously, on the applicant. So everybody needs to be aware that you do have a bundle of documents and have everything that has been sent in through to us. And as you indicated, Chair, I do have a written submission from Councillor Green, who unfortunately is unable to attend in person today.
Okay. I have got hard copies of all the documentation, and I know the other councillors received all the notices. So I have actually got a table here full of paperwork, all split into sections. So everybody here be aware that we do have all the paperwork in front of us. There isn't any additional paperwork, is there, Margaret, that we haven't been expecting?
No.
So we don't have to have permission for anything else. We will be probably having cross-examination throughout this. So we'll move on now to proceed to hear and determine the application with reference to the Council Statement of Licensing Policy, the statutory guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the 4 licensing objectives, which are prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And I will now ask Margaret O'Donnell, the licensing officer, shall outline the facts and the application and the relevant representations received from the parties. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the hearing this morning is to consider an application for a premises licence for a premises known as Lateral, number 83 Banks Road, West Kirby. The application is to allow the sale of alcohol Sunday to Saturday, 11 a.m. until 10:30 p.m. and on a Boxing Day, 11 a.m. until midnight, and on New Year's Eve from 11 a.m. until midnight. Within the application, there is a reference to the provision of recorded music, 8:30 until 11 p.m. and live music, 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. with the hours open to the public requested as Sunday to Saturday, 8:30 until 11 p.m, Boxing Day, 8:30 until 1 a.m, and New Year's Eve, 8:30 until 1 a.m. As members will be aware, as part of the application process, the applicant has to submit an operating schedule where they set out what their application is and what conditions they would be content to be put on the licence should it be granted. Following discussions with Merseyside Police, the applicant has further agreed to conditions relating to CCTV at the premises and also an age check policy to be implemented in respect of checking people's age if they appear to be under the age of 21. Members will be aware, as indicated, that there have been representations from local residents in respect of the application, along with representations from ward councillors. There's also been a petition submitted expressing concerns regarding the application. There have been no representations from any of the responsible authorities, and there have in fact been 2 representations from local residents in support of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Either of the councillors, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Greaney, you've got any questions to the licensing officer?
No, I'm okay.
No, thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant, if you can put your camera on now, please, that's Mr. North and Mr. Manhattan. Who's going to speak first out of the are you both going to speak, or you're going to
Yeah, we're both going to speak today, but I'm going to make the opening statement if that's okay.
And may I suggest, as I said before, when the people are putting their objections in, they'll come back afterwards. So if you hear anything you want to write it down. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So go ahead and make out your application now, please.
Okay. Lateral's application was written by me. It is based on advice from previous applicants and research I conducted on previous Wirral-based licence applications. I thought it wise to consider precedents set by past applications, one applications which faced similar scenarios and setups to us, examples such as Trappist House Hoylake and the Beer Lab Heswell. Our application was deliberately designed to be broader than what we would need for our day-to-day operation. This was to avoid the need for any future temporary events notices. It should be noted that concerns of local residents put forward by way of representations have very much taken our business model and what we intend to do completely out of context. We are a bistro, a sit-down venue with background music, one which employs chefs and will have a full food menu available until close of service. The supply of alcohol would accompany this offering. Without the ability to sell alcohol, we would be at a competitive disadvantage. Many other businesses located on Banks Road have been afforded this opportunity. In relation to live music, what we had in mind as per our application was merely an artist on an acoustic guitar setting an ambience for customers. This has been an incredibly stressful process, and it is a shame that our character has been brought into question. We are reasonable people. Given the concerns residents raised, we held a meeting between ourselves and agreed that we are willing to remove the live music element in order to prevent disturbance. Through representations, residents have complained of a lack of consultation. We sent letters and Christmas cards out to explain our intentions. Admittedly, this could have been done at an earlier date, and we have apologised to several residents for this. However, we did have email contact details on the front window of the shop for over 2 months. This, along with an accompanying note saying what we were and who we are. Only 2 residents got in contact with us. We are completely open to consultation and are willing to make concessions wherever necessary. Consultation needs to be productive and should work for all parties. This business is our lives and our income. We are not in a position to simply accept suggestions that are at direct odds with the success of our business and what we're trying to achieve.
Is that your statement finished?
It is.
The gentleman next to you wants to say anything?
No.
Okay. I'll ask you a question before we move on. You said you had a meeting amongst yourselves. You mean just the owners of the restaurants itself, or the bistro?
Yeah, and shareholders.
And you agreed to remove, if needed, the live music?
Yeah, we're happy to make that concession.
Yeah, because we paid for, I mean, nobody asked us to, off our own backs. We got a sound assessment conducted, and the results basically indicated that live music wouldn't be appropriate, so we're happy to remove that element.
So what you're saying is, if we were to put a condition on saying only recorded music as a certain sound level, you'd be happy with that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yes, Margaret.
Chair, I do apologise because my hand function seems to have been disabled. So if I could just explain the Licensing Act and the provisions that go with the Licensing Act. Whilst it may be that the applicant can give an undertaking that they will not provide live music, the granting of a premises licence with the provision of alcohol does give an automatic provision for live music and recorded music following deregulation some years ago. So there is a provision there where you don't have to apply for live music up until 11 p.m. for a venue of this size. So it would merely be an undertaking. There can't be a condition that goes on to prevent that. But it is obviously important that residents hear what is said by the applicant in terms of their business model. But in terms of the legislation, I just needed to advise on that to be open and transparent.
Yeah, perhaps I shouldn't have said a condition. I just wanted to clarify that where they were coming from, and they were happy to undertake that they were going to remove. Do you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say that I made the mistake of actually putting that on the blue piece of paper in the window because I thought we had to do that. But like I say, we're happy to not play live music if it's going to address concerns.
And I know it's very difficult in the pandemic to have a meeting with residents, but you did put things in the window with all your contact details on, did you? And there was only 2 people.
Only two people got back to us.
Councillor Mitchell.
No questions. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I thought from your body language you were revving up there to ask a question.
I was reading all my comments I've put down, that's all.
Okay. Councillor Greaney, you've got any questions at the moment?
It's only basically going back to the business model. It's from the application, we're looking at a bistro serving food in the evenings at night, and to apply for an alcohol licence to people can have drinks and cocktails and things with the meal, but your business model doesn't entail then having walk-in customers who will come in and just have a drink and stand at the bar and go out again. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the business model is table service. It will be strictly table service. We do have a few, in normal times, seats at the bar for bar snacks and drinks at the bar, but everything is based around table service and tables that don't really allow or encourage for groups greater than 4.
If you were to be granted a licence today, would you envisage in the future that you'll be changing your model to where people could just wander in and have a drink?
We're not able to do that anyway in terms of planning. So in terms of what planning have actually allowed us to do, we're set out to be a bistro and we're happy to take that on board.
Yeah, we know planning wouldn't allow it at the moment, but if you got planning permission, would you consider doing that?
I think this whole process has been a learning curve for us, and especially hearing from residents as well. We're more than happy to kind of meet in the middle, make concessions, and provide confidence that we're going to continue doing that. We don't want to make it seem like we're going to change our minds as soon as everything's been granted. We're happy to continue being a bistro as we're planning to now, and as we're saying today.
Okay. Yeah, we've already invested a lot of time and effort into that project now, so a change of mind is just not really on the cards at all.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wright, you will have the, sorry, just go back to the applicant. You will have the ability to come back later on as well and speak again, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Wright, do you want to give your little piece now, please?
Could I ask Jamie and Warren a question, Chair, at this stage?
Quickly, yes, go on.
Hi, Jamie and Warren. Could you just describe? Do you have a menu that you're likely to present here? What have you got ideas of the food? You know, in a menu of substantial food.
Yes, well, basically that's the reason we've taken our head chef on so early, because at the moment we're actually a fully takeout menu. So we're working with her to compile that at the moment for when we actually do fully open as a bistro. The menu we can provide at a later date once it's finally compiled for residents to see.
That will be a later date. Alison, can you go on to your statement now, please?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Sorry, Chair.
There will be questions later as well.
Chair. Sorry. Yes. Can I just, before, are we into statements now? I just wanted to ask a couple of questions of the applicant, or are you going straight into statements from the?
We'll be coming on to you later on questions, Ken. This is the point where we have the ward councillor. Oh, she can ask questions actually. Sorry about that, Alison. Alison, if you want to ask any more questions of the applicant, sorry about that. I've misread what I've got in front of me here.
Yes, I thank Warren, isn't it, for your statement there. I was just, you've answered my question about the menu, but you haven't any detail. Yes, I understand that you're working with a chef, but what is the sort of food that you had in mind to serve here?
So our chef we're looking at a Scandinavian cuisine. We're looking at obviously small plates with it being a bistro. Our chef is plant-based. So there will be quite a heavy weighting on vegan plant-based food.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So you're working on that at the moment.
Yeah.
I was just concerned, could you describe, a typical day, the day-to-day operation here in the bistro? Is that possible at this stage, or is that still?
Yeah, no, that's completely possible. I'll take this. So in my statement, when I mentioned that we'd applied for a broad license, which was probably more than we needed for day to day, our day will operate very much like it is now, just allowing sit-ins. So it'll be a coffee shop up until 5 o'clock in the evening. None of the daytime staff will be serving alcohol. The only reason we applied for the broader license was in case the venue was rented out, or in case we had something on there in the day on a one-off opportunity to save me having to apply for a 10. But the day-to-day operation will be a coffee shop up until 5 o'clock. It will have a brunch offering, and then at 5 o'clock it will become complete table service with the meal menu alongside accompanying drinks.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Is that all your questions, Alison, for now?
Yes, thank you for now. Thank you.
Sorry for the little mix-up there. I went off my script there. Right, Ken, you're right. You can now ask questions.
Well, sorry, I think, sorry, Chair, I'm just looking at the licensing panel hearing procedure that you're following, and I think my opportunity to ask questions is at the end, so I'll leave it at that and see what others have raised.
I've got it down here that you can speak, you can ask if you want.
Well, the only thing I was going to suggest at this time is obviously we've heard an opening statement from the applicant, and I think there's likely to be a number of questions nevertheless raised by the residents in respect of more particular detail in relation to the operation of the venue, as has been highlighted by Councillor Wright. So I wondered if the applicant could perhaps go into a little more detail in relation to what they're proposing, incorporating perhaps some of the concerns that have been raised by the residents, such as, your use of bins, the noise element. You've obviously obtained a noise report, and perhaps you could comment on that in light of the comments made by the resident noise expert, and also the nature of, as I say, the menu, the individuals you're seeking to attract to the venue, and also any air conditioning or kitchen ventilators that I think you've either putting up or you're proposing to put up, and the noise implications of that, to try and answer some of the queries raised in the residents' representations.
Yeah, so with regards to the nature of the customers, we have found kind of a lot of the assumptions so far to be really inaccurate, actually. I think we understand the negative connotations that come with alcohol, but the majority of our custom actually comes from large young families. So we get kind of majority 25 to 34, but we welcome all ages, and we're expecting people to just come along for an exciting food and drink venue.
So in relation to your application, you refer to a drugs policy,
yes,
and cocktails. How does that fit into your management of the premises? It's a bit confusing, comparing to what you're now describing as a sit-down eatery, whereas what has perhaps been elicited to the application sounds more like I appreciate what you're saying about planning, but nevertheless comes across as a stand-up drinking bar.
Yeah. So I wrote the application, so I'll take this. I've obviously never written an application of this nature before, and I took advice off friends I've got that own licensed premises on the Wirral, and I kind of wrote that application above and beyond. So whilst it may have provisions in there that seem excessive for the nature of the business we want to conduct, I thought it wise to go above and beyond rather than not address those concerns. I don't expect people to consume drugs on our premises. I don't expect a massive excess of alcohol, but I thought it was wise to have these policies in place and train staff appropriately on the off chance. But it's not really related to our business model. If anything, I've gone further than I needed to with that application.
Okay. So how many covers are you expecting at the premises?
Yes, so we've made room for around 30 at the moment that's in there. Because we've said in the application that there will be a maximum, we're planning for a maximum of 40, including staff.
Yeah, so can I just pick up on that? I made a mistake in the application. So when I spoke to Helena Swarbrick at licensing, there was various things wrong with my initial application, so I had to submit it again. And myself and Jamie had a meeting to discuss what we thought was an appropriate number. And we were humming and hawing between 40 and 50, and that was including staff. And we settled on 40, but I only edited one of the boxes of the application. So it says 50 and 40 on the application, but we can confirm that the number is 40.
Okay. And in relation to can you describe a bit more about how the noise is going to be maintained so that it doesn't cause any nuisance to residents above?
Okay, so in relation to what you were saying before about air conditioning, there's an air conditioning unit already in place in the premises from the previous residents that we're going to continue to use. We've added a cooler fan to the cellar area, which is like a requirement that we need in order to keep the produce in there cold. We actually went out of our way to make sure that was installed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon rather than the morning to avoid extra disturbance from upstairs. But in relation to the general running, details of the existing sound insulation in the ceiling are available in our assessment report. They're on page 106 of the evidence, section 5, paragraph 3. And we've got a statement from the building consultants at Grantley Low. They did the original plans for the building back in 2006 when it was renovated, and they've confirmed that the materials in the ceiling that are mentioned in our sound report, it is the case that they are accurate. And in terms of keeping the noise down, we only intend on using a small domesticated Sonos speaker that won't be attached to the wall. It's literally a speaker it fits in the palm of your hand. And it also has a sound limiting feature on the app. So we're able to limit the sound that produces so that staff can't turn it up.
Right, so that's only going to be background music then. And there's been reference in the expert's report from Mr. Vivian in relation to penetrations in the ceiling. Is that something that you're looking at as to whether there's going to be additional material that may need to be required to prevent sound escaping upstairs? Because I think that's a big concern of the residents.
So in terms of these penetrations in the ceiling, they're small square hatches that gave access to the ceiling panel. And as per our report, there is a mention of a recommendation of mineral wool. And if it comes to it, that is something we're willing to do and look at.
Okay. Do you have any comment on the proposed conditions then that's been referred to in the Blue Sky report? In relation to noise.
I've only got the conditions that were offered to us by the solicitor to hand.
Right.
The Blue Sky report. Give me 2 seconds and I'll just try and get that up. Yeah, I've got it now. Sorry, 1 second.
If I can just assist here, Chair, it's page 131 of the bundle.
131 and 132.
Yeah, I've found it now.
Is this in the application pack?
Yes. There are 9 conditions that set out. Some, in light of what you've indicated, obviously you may have a view upon. I'm thinking about...
I only have access to... Richard Leyland only sent me the documents I submitted to the bundle, so I don't actually have the bundle.
Right, okay. Okay, well, maybe that's something that can be addressed then by the applicant, by the resident's solicitor, Mr. Dalglish, as to whether he thinks, in light of what you're saying, some of these are still relevant, because they still, they refer to a noise limiter. You mentioned that there is a noise limiter reducing music, the level of sound. There may be some issue about loudspeakers, it being certainly situated in certain areas of the bistro. Some of the things I just wanted to clarify is that the bins and deliveries, etc. What's the intention in relation to that? Because obviously there are limited emptying of any bottles, etc. Has there been any sort of reference to that?
So at the moment, we don't actually have a glass bin because of COVID restrictions. We're not able to, and obviously we don't have the license yet. But once we do get the glass bin, I'm more than happy to arrange with the waste management company to collect that within certain hours that are deemed appropriate.
Okay.
I've got no problem making those provisions.
Right. And have you had any experience of this type of premises before?
So I've personally worked in several bars for many years, but I've never actually owned or ran a premises like this.
So we've actually we've decided to employ a manager of the bistro setup, the evening setup, who has a lot more experience than us in that area.
Okay.
He actually works for another business, another premises that has a license in the Wirral at the moment.
Right. And as far as you're concerned, what about residents have raised issues about the parking to the side of the premises. There are 4, I think, spaces. Are they spaces connected to your premises, or are they to the residents?
So one of the spaces, when we took rent of the property, one of the spaces had a sign suggesting that it belonged to Stacks, which was the previous occupants. So that's the only space we're currently using.
Right. Okay. Okay, Chair. I think I'll leave it at that for the moment, and obviously open it up for the residents. I may want to come back to some further clarity as the hearing proceeds. Thank you for that.
Can you take your hand down, please, Ken?
I didn't realise it was. Oh, hang on. Right. Okay.
Okay. There was just a little point. There was some accusations of noise while you were doing all the building work. Do you want to have any defence on that?
In relation to the accusation of the building work noise, obviously this is a planning issue, but it's been a stressful process for our building team, to be honest, as well. I'm totally sympathetic that will have caused a lot of noise for residents. The residents complained of noise, but came down pretty much on the daily to berate our building team at completely reasonable times. So I'll give you a prime example. We had that Stellar extractor fan fitted at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I got the electrician to do me a favour to come and do that later on in the day. And then we have a resident from upstairs coming down and filming the team with a camera at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, 2 o'clock in the afternoon is completely reasonable and within the Wirral Code of Practice. So I don't, it's been a difficult one for us because whilst I appreciate that it will have caused a lot of disturbance, it will have caused a lot of noise, we're building a bistro, like we tried to get it done as quick as possible. Like, what residents kind of have misunderstood is it was our best interest to get this done as quick as possible as well, because it's costing us money the longer it goes on.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to that. I think it's important to note that we're not just carelessly moving forward. Like, we have understood and sympathised with the stress that I think it was approximately 7 weeks of construction work will have caused. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have caused that stress. Unfortunately, everything was done necessary to develop the shop itself. We were already under restrictions for COVID lockdowns in our other shop in Heswell, and we couldn't really afford too much time added on to the construction. We needed to get trading as soon as possible to ensure we were paying rent.
Can I just quickly add that issues came up on the job that we could never have foreseen, which actually added to the noise. So, for example, we needed a wastage pipe putting in across the flooring because the waste facilities there weren't adequate. And that included blasting the floor up, which obviously is going to cause a lot of disturbance. It was a job we didn't particularly want to pay for. It was a job we didn't particularly want to do, but that's kind of the nature of these kind of projects.
Okay. You said just to get you, with your character, you said you worked in certain bars in the past. Could you just give us the name of a couple that you've actually worked in?
Yes. So I went to university in Reading. So I worked for Reading University bars, and they basically own 7 or 8, I can't remember off the top of my head. They own about 7 or 8 bars, 2 of which are open to members of the public. And I was actually a supervisor at London Road, and that was a bar open to the public until 1:30 in the morning.
Okay, have you got any bars that you've worked in that were local to here that we would know?
No.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. Can I ask the solicitor, Mr. Daglish, if you have any questions of the applicant, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning all, and good morning Warren and Jamie. Could I just be clear? I think I'm clear on this, but it'd be useful to clear up. Do either of you or both of you hold personal licences?
So I've completed the course and I've just sent my forms in to become the DPS for the premises. So I originally was going to have Jenny Allen to become the DPS of the premises because she used to work for Homebrew Tap, and I was under the impression that she held a personal licence. And when I spoke to Richard and found out that wasn't the case, I'm going to be working shifts there and I have control of the business. So I just felt it was more appropriate that I'm going to be the DPS.
Okay, thank you. We asked ahead of this for details on the sound insulation. I'm still a bit hazy on that. It sounds like there's still some sound insulation to go in. Have you got
Excuse
can
me,
you-
excuse me a second, Mr. Dixon. Hello. Could you just
Hello.
Could you just switch your camera off, please?
Off.
Switch your camera off, please. Thank you. Carry on.
Sorry, so I just wanted, even if you're perhaps repeating yourself slightly, to be clear on the sound insulation and sound deadening measures that have been put in place.
Okay, so if you go to our acoustic report, so in the evidence, it will be, I think it's page 106, section 5, paragraph 3. The reduced strata acoustic flooring is, our building consultants confirm that actually is in place, and that is the material, like they've backed up the report. And the letter backing up the report is page 115 of the evidence. We're willing to put mineral wool in if it's a concern for the hatchets that obviously open up the ceiling. We're willing to put mineral wool in. But once we explain to our sound team that the only music we'll be playing is background music from a small domesticated Sonos speaker that won't be attached to the wall, they didn't deem any additional insulation appropriate.
Okay, well, I'll these are just the questions at this stage, so we may comment a bit further. Where is the smoking area to be, and how is that to be managed?
Yes, so we read the proposed conditions. The smoking area at the moment, our only real available area is out front, but we are willing to limit that to 4 people outside at any one time. Of course, without drinks as well. Drinks won't be allowed outside. We'll also have plenty of signage up on the windows to ensure that anybody that is outside at any given time will give plenty of thought and consideration to the residents upstairs and in the local area.
Okay, thank you. And do you have a draft noise and dispersal policy?
We don't at the moment. We were waiting till close to the time and upon completion of the application process. Being a sit-down venue, discouraging large groups greater than 4, we don't really expect to use one, but we recognise the importance of it. And we'll be training our team using a dispersal policy in the team training handbook as well. And once that's completed, we can provide that to local residents to see as well.
Okay. Sorry, one further one. You mentioned when you were speaking earlier, clientele. I mean, obviously that's difficult to gauge at the moment because your shop in Heswell is a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And we're in COVID. So I just wondered how you'd come to the assessment that this is going to be families and 25 to 34-year-olds.
Yeah, we're running that based on data that we've collected showing the demographics of our customers. Obviously, you're completely right. At the moment, we have a coffee shop in Heswell that does not sell alcohol. However, I think our offering suggests it as well. So our offering will be very much based on quality as opposed to quantity. It will be a higher quality offering. We will be paying staff to be very well trained across the board. So we don't expect to deal with drunken behaviour, to require a drugs policy or anything of the sort. But we completely recognise that where there is alcohol, there can be poor behaviour and there can be noise disturbance. So we're happy to take any.
Yeah, just to add on that as well, the price point of our menu we feel will bring that age clientele. We feel like the younger generation may well be priced out from what our offering is.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Vivian, did you have any questions?
Mr. Douglas, I will invite the people in. Okay. It's actually, at the moment, any local residents who may feel that some questions haven't been asked of the applicants that the solicitor hasn't asked. Are any of the residents there who may want to ask a question of the applicant?
I'd like to ask a question.
Who's that? Simon Trout?
Roger Dixon.
Is that you?
Yes, that's me. Yes, a question for Warren and Jamie, if I may. He says, why haven't you tried this in Haswell, this idea, so that you'd know that it was tried and tested? Because it seems to me they're very similar demographics you're attracting, based by your social media sort of feeds, as it were, and the people who comment. What is the reason behind why it was up to West Kirby first, and why haven't you tried this elsewhere before?
Yeah, I think with West Kirby, with Haswell, it's very much down to size of the property. I think we were happy to keep it as a coffee shop to prevent it becoming too chaotic. We're already pretty challenged with space, so we manage it well at the moment. But I think if we were to go down that avenue, it'd be a different kind of offering, more of a retail offering, really, to be a kind of shop selling bottles of wine further down the road. But with West Kirby, we had significantly more space and room to provide something extra to what we provide currently in Haswell.
Yeah, I can just add to that as well. We have a really good relationship with the owner of the beer lab over the road, and we've worked with him on several offerings, and we wouldn't want to step on anyone's toes.
Is that what you want to ask, Mr. Trout? Anything else?
Yeah. Yes, there was a comment you made earlier on about possibly renting the place out. Was this for events or for family dues or something where they can hire the place off you? Is that the intention there?
Potentially. It's not something we've given great thought. I just wanted to give us the opportunity to do so. And the advice I was given was to apply for a broader license than what we would need on the day-to-day. If that was the wrong advice, then I can only apologise for that at this stage. But that's the application I submitted.
Okay. But what extra safeguards would you put in place over and above? And obviously, you're reconsidering the conditions of the original application to some degree, which is good news, but for us residents. But yeah, if you're going to have individual dues, how would you control those? What extra measures would you put in place for those?
Yes, I mean, individual dues would be managed very much the same as the day-to-day running. There would be a limited number of people, and we would still serve alcohol in exactly the same way. We would hold policies on making sure people were of age, and we would be limiting the time period that due was allowed on for. We would also be providing food for it as well.
And is the intention, you say serving food from 5 o'clock, when's the last serving on food? Because obviously there's a clearing up phase that you'll need after the premises have closed.
Yeah.
So, and we live right at the top of the road, as you probably know, so we're close to Andres. So we can hear, comings and goings well past midnight there some nights. So when will be your last serving? So in other words, how would that fit in with seeing people off the premises?
Yeah, last serving of food will be at 10:30, and staff will be paid to stay. So it'll be staff on the premises later than customers. Customers will have to leave the premises at 11 o'clock, and I will direct staff to make sure that clearing up process and kind of kicking out, so to speak, happens accordingly and on time, and staff will be paid an extra half an hour to ensure that clean-up happens.
Yeah, but Mercy would phrase that. So what would be the last time someone could book to come and eat there in the evening? You're saying serving food till 10:30, but is that sort of complete a meal that's been ordered earlier on, sort of thing?
Oh, yes. So the last time that somebody will be able to order a meal will be 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. Okay. Thank you.
Are they all your questions? Yes?
Yes, thanks.
Is there any other residents who may want to ask a question?
Can I ask a question, please?
Who is it?
Jennifer Karl.
Okay, Mr. Guest, could you turn your camera off, please? And Jenny, could you put yours on, please?
I don't have video.
Okay, carry on. So is it Jenny?
Jenny Bakali.
Hi, Jenny, yes. Okay, go on.
Two questions. One is about outside. You say that smoking is going to be at the front. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about seating outside and eating and drinking, because that seems to be a norm in West Kirby at the moment.
Yes, at the moment, again, this is something that we're willing to work with local residents on, because we don't have a designated space for seating. We at the moment are envisaging it will only support the idea of only having 4 people out front smoking if you discourage them staying there. So having seats out front in the evening will naturally encourage people to congregate in that area, which we're trying to evade at the moment. So we're happy to work with residents. We obviously would look at having seats outside during the day, possibly during the summer. It's very seasonal, but that would be during the coffee cafe setup. In the evening, we're happy to remove those.
Okay, so you are considering something outside, the gathering outside,
not in the way
and would smokers be seated outside as well?
Yeah, not in the way of
I'm not
alcohol.
talking about alcohol. No, I'm not referring to alcohol, just the presence of, people can sit outside.
Yes, so similar to our place in Heswell at the moment, when the weather gets a little bit better, we provide benches out front for dog walkers, etc.
And would smokers have that all the time, somewhere to sit?
Smokers wouldn't have that because, we expect smokers to be using the evening service, and that won't be present for smokers.
So you'd be removing benches?
Yes.
Okay. And a second question, you're talking about the music and a small speaker, and I know small speakers, but I don't know, can of Coke size can be very, very loud. I've got one in the house. I'm very familiar how loud they can go. But beyond that, what type of music are you going to play?
We will basically be playing music very similar to what we play at the moment during the day.
I don't know what that is.
Just acoustic music.
What type of music is it? Is it music with a beat? Is it mellow music? What type of music? Because some music carries quite a
it would definitely constitute
way with a beat. That's my concern.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Are there any other residents? No.
Roger Dixon.
All right, Roger, can you put your camera on, please?
Yes, I'm a resident of the building on the 3rd floor. I have 2 questions. In the application, I think it's called application, you say a professional sound assessment of the noise levels to which local residents and customers are likely subjected to has been undertaken by a suitably qualified and competent person, and adjustments have been made to reduce levels whenever necessary. My question is, I don't know what measurements were taken, using what instruments, and how they were taken. They didn't come into the flats, the 2 flats above, to check the noise, but there would be no point in that because, you're not into normal operations. So my request is that you carry out noise assessments when you're in normal operation. So that's point 1. Jenny Backley just pointed out the question of noise and vibration. We've been suffering horrendous noise and vibration in the preparation of the premises. Well, I realised that noise is going to occur. But what we're upset about is that we were given no warning, and in order that we could perhaps take some measures to be out of the place during operations. So it leaves doubt in my mind as to what the meaning of this statement of professional sound assessment of the noise levels was taken, etc., etc. I'd like to see some response on that and acoustic measurements taken during normal operation in both the above apartments. My second point is fire safety. We live on the 3rd floor, and there is one exit down 2 flights of stairs, the exit being the front door. The kitchen happens to be directly beneath my bedroom, so just to give you an idea of where it's located, I'm wondering if there should not be a professional fire safety inspection carried out, and that we can get some recommendations from the fire safety people. Okay, that's it.
Ken Abram,
I think,
can I bring you in on that for the moment?
yeah, I think Margaret has a more practical view in relation to the fire safety. I mean, I think they are responsible authority. I don't think they made any representations, but clearly it would be useful to clarify from the applicant what steps or discussions they've had with the fire safety officer in relation to the points raised by Mr. Dixon. Obviously, in the old days of public entertainment licensing, fire safety was part of the considerations that would been given to members of a committee, but clearly that's not necessarily the case now. It's expected that there are appropriate fire precautions in place, but perhaps the applicant can clarify that.
Yes, we've actually had confirmation and a site visit from the local fire service and building control, and they've clarified that our development is fine. However, moving forward, we'd be open to exploring ways in which we can maximise the safety for the residents upstairs living in close proximity and create fire assessment.
Yeah, we're happy to work because we're happy to work with the freeholder upstairs. If the fire brigade want to come back out and conduct a full assessment that leaves you more assured, then we're happy to work with you on that.
If I could just interject there, I've been notified as you're speaking that the fire authority did respond and have looked at the premises, and they've had no issues with it the way it's operating at the moment. But I understand what Mr. Dixon's concerns are, because it's not actually operating at the moment, but we've made a note of that.
My concern also, I should have mentioned that there are 4 residents in the building on the second and third floors. All of them over 80, including me, of course. And I'm just wondering if, in case of fire, and we're trapped 2 flights of stairs down to the front door. I have 2 years ago returned from living in Canada. This would not be allowed in Ontario. There would have to be an outdoor fire escape from any third floor. But that's okay, that's Canada, which maybe explains my concern.
Okay.
And one of the 4 residents is mobility impaired. And
you've got a Stenolift going up the stairs, haven't you?
We have, yes, we've got one going down the stairs too, but it's not much use in the fire.
Okay. Is that all your main questions now then, Mr. Dixon?
Yeah, yes, sir, yes.
Okay, right. Anybody else? Does the sound engine, we had the sound chat pop up before. Does he want to ask any questions?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, Chair. It's just a point of clarification on the building regulations checks. Hello, Warren, Harrow, Jamie. I just want to make the point that you shouldn't take too much comfort from the building regulations inspection. It is purely.
Excuse me. Have you got any questions of the applicant?
Yes, I have. It sort of leads on from this, Chair.
Yeah, we want.
Oh, okay, fine. Fine. I can cut to the chase, Chair. Very straightforward, very simple. Has the sound insulation of the separating floor been tested? And could we see a copy of that test, please?
So in relation to the test, do you want me to let you pick up on this in terms of when? So mentioned in the Grantley Low letter, page 115 of the evidence that we've provided, we attempted to set up arrangements to conduct a full sound assessment with entry to the flats upstairs. Now, when I mentioned in my opening statement that our character had been brought into question, some representation forms, now I don't know why this is the case, but I mean, people are entitled to do what they want.
Jamie, can you just wait? Mr. Dixon, can you please turn your camera off, please? Thank you. Go on, Jamie.
Some representation forms, which I've read through, are implying that residents upstairs were fully willing and able to let us into their flats in order to conduct the sound assessment. Now, our building consultants have confirmed that wasn't the case. And Jamie also took a phone call with Joe Webster, where Joe Webster implied to Jamie that her parents were shielding and we wouldn't be able to gain access to the flat. Now, we're willing to concede that our sound team wouldn't have gone in anyway, given their COVID policy. But 100% we were put under the impression that it was residents that wouldn't let us in the property.
Okay.
And we were willing.
We've never even been approached.
I'm talking about the Totties directly above Lateral.
Oh.
And can I just add as well that this sound assessment that everybody seems to be commenting on, it was never a legal requirement. We went above and beyond to go and get this sound assessment, and had this sound assessment come back and said we needed to do X, Y, Z to the ceiling, we're open and willing to do that. So if mineral wool is required to fix the stopgaps, we'll put it in.
Yeah. Guys, it is...
Mr. Dixon, please don't interrupt. You can come in at a later time. Go on, Mr. Vivian.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite normal for some form of detailed noise assessment to accompany an application because it assists the licensing committee. It just helps us understand how the building works. The point is that the original tests for the conversion of the flats would have been based on a very different use on the ground floor. And in fact, the minimum requirements of building regulations would just assume that the ground floor use was exactly the same as a residential use. And I think that's the important point. And all I'm saying is I don't want you to take too much comfort from this, that in my opinion, you do need to do some very significant, substantial extra work to the building, which is obviously has a cost implication to you. And I'm just trying to help here and just assist by clarifying that the building control tests carried out during the conversion wouldn't have assumed there was this commercial use at night in the ground floor. And so that's the point, really.
Yeah, the sound assessment that we paid for was third party. It's not related to building control. We actually
no, and that test. Sorry, just to cut across you, but we sort of summarised that test was site's planning regulation, and this is a licensing committee. That test was addressing the issues under planning, and it cites the National Planning Policy Framework. It doesn't mention the Licensing Act. It doesn't mention the activities and constraints. It doesn't mention public nuisance. It doesn't mention any of that. That's not the report that you have in front of you. And once again, I'm saying to try and assist you, don't take too much comfort from that report, because that's not a report for a premises licence application.
Mr. Vivian, have you any other questions you may wish to ask the applicant?
No, that's it at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other residents who haven't spoken who wish to ask a question on something that hasn't been discussed? Okay, we will now bring in the licensing panel. Having said that, I think all our thunder's been stolen now by all the questions that have already been asked. What I would say is I appreciate from your comments, the applicants, that you probably have over-egged the pudding when you've been laying out the application because you put down all the drugs, and I can see why you've done that. But it does raise questions, which is unfortunately by over-egging it, that's what happens. You said that you have, is it 30 to 40 people you're applying for to be in the restaurant or the bistro? We actually counted up yesterday off the plans, and I know we may be wrong, but we would say 27 to 30 people could sit down. Is that incorrect? Can you have 40 people sitting down?
So that was 40 including staff.
That's 40 including staff. So
Yeah.
how many staff are you going to have on site at any one time?
It really varies, but on a Saturday service,
What's the most?
the most staff we could have on site would probably be around, I'd probably say around 8 or 9.
So that means you'd have 32 people as customers coming in. That's what you're looking at.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you're looking at 32 sit-down covers.
Yes, yeah. But this also just depends as well, because we were obviously trying to plan out the shop itself with tables and chairs, and it's actually limited to that amount anyway.
Well, let's say we were looking at it yesterday, the panel,
Yeah.
councillors, because obviously we have a pre-meeting just to go through all the evidence before we look at it properly with you. And we were looking at the seating area, and I've got it between 27 and 30 people. So you're actually saying at the most 30 people. Okay. Councillor Mitchell, have you got any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A lot of discussion about noise. You did say there's a sound limiter on the piece of equipment that you're going to install. Who will be responsible for monitoring that?
Myself and Jamie.
And is there any way that there's a governor on it that can actually be limited so nobody else can change that?
I can't. I don't want to make promises I can't keep off the top of my head. But if I can password protect it and it can be kept between myself and Jamie and the evening manager, then I will do so.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. We will have a management team who will be all very well versed in maintaining that volume level.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question was in relation to the requests that were put in by officers in relation to extra CCTV, where you can have those installed.
So with the CCTV, it hasn't actually been installed yet because I waited for the police conditions to come back, and that we're waiting on the electrician to come back to finish the job. So there will be CCTV cameras capturing the front door, the back door, above the till, and then the main room.
Okay, thank you for that. One last question. It was the comment from one of the residents in relation to individual events. If you had held a party, for argument's sake, how would you make sure that they're monitored properly?
Yeah, kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think we will be treating it like any day-to-day activity. We'll be limiting the number of people inside. They will be made very well aware beforehand. There are only a certain number of covers provided in the shop, and we won't allow people kind of standing up in large groups inside the shop. We're only allowed a certain number of people, and although I said before the shop is significantly larger than our place in Heswell, it's still not a huge area of space now, especially considering we've kind of made the bar quite large itself. So we will be running the same policies, limiting people outside, table service, all of the same.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Greaney.
No, I'm fine, Chair. As you indicated, everything that could be asked of Warren and Jamie has been asked, I think.
Right. I'm back on my script now, Kenneth. So if you want to come in again and ask any further questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Just in relation to, obviously, the use of the outside area is something which may be subject to a separate application for a license out there, whereby they take into account the width of the pavement, health and safety issues, etc. But in relation to the bench, can you just clarify what you're proposing to have outside there during the day? Benches. I mean, it's a separate application, but are you proposing then to bring them into the premises at 5 p.m. once the cafe part of the of your business is concluded?
Yes, they will be removed from the outside area.
Okay, and in relation to deliveries, have you had any discussions in relation to timing of deliveries?
I think we placed most focus on the glass bins, didn't we?
Yeah.
Beers, with them being by far and away the loudest. We use a company called Bagnall & Morris for our waste disposal. We haven't.
No. So that's a conversation I'm going to open with Bagnall & Morris, and even if it costs us more money, if you know, to do it within a reasonable time frame, is something we're completely willing to do.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one of the conditions mentioned by the residents is to have, as I say, I mentioned earlier, the bottles being emptied if there are any. What sort of to maybe a reasonable time between 7 p.m. or no bottles to be emptied between 7 p.m. and 9 a.m. Do you have an issue with that?
No, that's fine, because what we'll do is we'll have a bottle bin in the premises, and that won't be taken out until like lunchtime the next day.
Oh, we completely understand that.
Yeah, and I think some mention of a challenge 25. I can't recall how the application refers to a challenge 21 or a challenge 25.
The application was challenge 21.
It was challenge 21 on the application, but we're happy either way.
Yeah, I think on the proposed conditions we were sent, the challenge 25 proof of age scheme was included, and we're more than happy to follow that.
Okay, and then mention of cocktails. Can you just clarify how that fits into your sort of provision? Because obviously as part of the application refers to cocktails, getting individuals who are, experienced in providing cocktails. Is that going to be part of the bistro event, or is that something again that you just put in there to broaden the application?
Well, the manager who will be taking care of the evening setup is a highly trained and experienced cocktail artist himself. We wanted to include it because that's his area of expertise, and we think we can provide a pretty special product with it. We will be taking it down the road of following our ethos across both stores, including the coffee shop as well, with regards to sustainability and encouraging the use of seasonal produce as well. So we just wanted to provide a product that would differentiate us as a business.
Okay. And you said the smoking area was going to be at the front, and you were minded to try and manage that by way of just allowing 4 individuals to go out for smoking at any one given time.
Yes.
And that would be a stand-up smoke, I presume, as opposed to the benches or any sitting out there.
Yeah,
it would be, and we're happy to, any kind of patrons seen to be refusing to accept that rule or breaking that rule will be asked to leave.
Okay, and the mention again about any noise emanating downstairs through the roof. Is there any special insulation or additional insulation into the kitchen area that you've either been advised on or considered or you're looking at?
Not to date, but I must say that because the menu is plant-based, there's no hazardous cooking in the kitchen. The kitchen area is literally a large electric oven.
Yeah,
and various open hot plates.
Yeah. So just going back to the fire safety comments before, just to add to that, we have actually based the menu loosely around that, in that we've reduced we don't have any open flames, and we have based the menu around a more plant-based offering, which will have a lower fire risk.
Okay. And in relation to, you've got air conditioning in the premises as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we inherited a Toshiba air conditioning unit from Stax, and we intend to carry on using it.
Right, okay. And that's situated on the outside of the building, not far, I think, from the pictures from Mr. Dixon's bedroom. Is that something that you've looked at in relation to any reduction in noise vibration, if it's going to be in the evening or late in the evening on a summer's evening?
That's something we'll be open to doing. We've never had it on. We've never had it functioning thus far. Yeah. So I don't actually know what kind of noise that generates, in all honesty.
But clearly you'd be minded to prevent any noise vibration emanating from that with some sort of a further advice going forward, whether it's an acoustic baffler or whatever, to prevent that noise disturbing the resident upstairs.
Yes, well, we'll have a technician coming out to look at the air conditioning unit and service it anytime soon, really. So when he's out, we can get advice on that.
Okay. And right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's it for now, Joe.
So what's he saying, that the food's going to be microwaved?
No. No, there's no deep fat frying is essentially what I'm saying.
Is it fan-assisted ovens and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Jenny McHill wants to come in, but before she does, Margaret O'Donnell, the licensing officer, do you want to make any comments with regards to clarification on smoking outside and also eating outside? Because I know people get confused with the different rules with COVID now, without going on to the payment. Do you want to mention anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if it assists, as indicated by Mr. Abraham, any placement of tables and chairs on the highway does require a separate licence. Under the current restrictions, the government introduced a new pavement licence, which is available up until September this year. Whether that's extended, obviously we don't know currently. Under that pavement licence, the council actually resolved that anybody being granted a pavement licence in Wirral, there would be a condition on that there would be no smoking allowed with that particular licence. Separately, under the highways legislation, which is the normal legislation that people apply to put tables and chairs on the highway, that might be a pathway long term. But again, yes, there are restrictions within those particular licences, and it is consulted upon with our colleagues in highways and obviously with local, local people as well. Also to be aware that the application today is for the consumption of alcohol on the premises. I think as indicated by the applicant that they would only be looking to have the outside offer during the day when it was a cafe, and they've already indicated that they weren't intending to have alcohol as an offer primarily at that time. But just to make the point that alcohol could not be consumed outside of the premises, whilst the licence only has alcohol for consumption on the premises. That can be varied at any time, but that's the application today. In terms of obviously people wanting to smoke, as we know, legislation prohibits that inside the premises, so it is a matter for a business to manage that appropriately. They do have, as I'm sure they are well aware and residents are aware, anyone who holds a premises licence has an overall obligation to prevent nuisance in any case, and therefore would need to manage that process in order to prevent any public nuisance being caused by anything that they do in their premises. And I think they've indicated some control measures that they would put in place for that. Hope that assists, Chair.
It does, Margaret. I mean, it isn't as simple as just putting tables and chairs outside. I think we on the committee realised that, but we couldn't have conveyed it as eloquently and as professionally as you just did.
Thank you, Chair.
Jenny, with what's just been said by the licence officers, you still want to come in on your point about smoking?
Yes, I would, please.
Okay, if you put your... Oh, you haven't got a camera, have you?
No.
Okay.
My question really has just come to light through this meeting today, and it's whether air quality assessments required in relation to smoking. Smoking is likely to be from the front, from the customer point of view, and possibly from the back, from a staff perspective, which is two sides of the accommodation above. And the apartments up there do get particularly hot. It's a sunny spot. Windows are open an awful lot. And I know that one of the 4 tenants is asthmatic. And I'm just wondering at what point that is deemed a nuisance, because smoke is unpleasant and difficult.
Margaret, would you like to answer that one? Sorry to throw it back at you. Are you prepared to answer that one?
It's not within my expertise. I think it may be more for the applicant to respond directly in respect to their concern, Chair. Thank you.
Do you understand the question? I'm not being facetious.
Yes, we understand, especially during summer, that residents above will want to have their windows open. Of course, having people smoking outside, there will be a level of air pollution there. That's something that, we've been advised that having a limited number of people out front, be it 4 people smoking at any one time out front, will be appropriate. But again, we are willing to work with residents above to ensure that those issues are mitigated.
Okay, thank you for that. As there's no other questions, I believe, everyone who's just participated, you will have a second bite at the cherry later on, so don't be concerned if you think you've missed something. I'll now invite Alison Wright, the councillor who's the local councillor, to make her representation, please.
Well, thank you to everybody. Yes, I think Warren and Jamie have expressed the lots of the points that I was going to bring out, but I will still bring them out. here, because I'm here representing and supporting residents, and I wish to express their concerns. But a lot of information has come out before this, of course. I just wanted to put this premises into context. It's at the end of a row of retail shops with residential properties above, and it is situated in a quiet residential area where there are many young families and retired people. And the building is on the high street, but it is really much a quiet part of town. As we know, the premises was a former art and gift shop. The frontage of the premises is on Banks Road and the side elevation is on Church Road, so it's on a corner. And there are residential properties and windows that face on the front, side and the rear, and I think that has been drawn out in the questioning, with a private road that runs along the rear of the premises, leading to the rear entrances and access to private garages. There has been concern, obviously, from residents with regard to the many representations for the panel to consider, and there's considerable focus on the activities that have been submitted in this application and the measures that have been outlined in order to manage them, we feel, fall short of meeting the licensing objectives, which is why we're having the conversation today. But I think that the applicants have tried to address that through the questioning. However, I will continue. In the beginning, and I think this was recognised, there was a lack of consultation, particularly with the residents that would be mostly affected by this business. There was a prolonged period of refit, I think it was 7 weeks, over many weeks, long hours by day, early morning to later on in the evening. And I know there were instances probably where they tried, as I think the applicant referred, where they tried to work with the residents. But nevertheless, this can cause considerably anxiety and distress to the elderly relatives living directly above the premises, which indeed have health issues, as they've expressed in their representations. And there is a distinct impact here on health and well-being, particularly on the residents living on the first and second floor. Those premises, those apartments cover the full footprint of the premises, and there is real concern with regard to that. It was thought originally there was sort of a lack of clarity at the beginning, and I think this has created immense anxiety in local residents living above and nearby. For whatever reason, they were unaware of really at the start and continuing as to what this premise was likely to turn out to be. And as I know that the applicants have a very successful business, a coffee business in another town, and I think it was thought that this was going to be in the same vein. I think this has been brought up in the questioning there. Firstly, as I say, I'm in support of residents, and I wish to articulate their collective concerns. And I know a lot of, in the questioning, some of this has been addressed. But there is significant concern through, as the application is established as a states to be a bistro, which the definition indicates the offer of simple but substantial food accompanying drink. There seems to be some evidence here, and I know, and I'm not bringing the applicants into character into disrepute at all, but I just want to point to evidence that suggests otherwise. It seems that the promotion of Lateral on social media, there's strong emphasis on cocktails and wine. And there is a lesser mention, which I was trying to draw out in my original question, on the food element. You mentioned small plates, and I think that's been discussed. And you discussed how your kitchen arrangement and what is going to be presented in terms of a Scandinavian style food, and it is going to be based on quality. And I accept that. But nevertheless, on social media, there is an impression given that there's a strong emphasis on the drink element here. Also, the interior plan, which I think is included with the documentation of the premises, portrays a long cocktail bar with seating around that, and the tables are relatively small, I think. Obviously, the bar is lined with seating, presumably, and it also suggests the plan that there's a small kitchen, and food is going to be served 7 days a week. And it has been mentioned, and I know that the applicant has suggested that this was, an overkill, if you like. The drug policy questions have been asked as whether this would be required for a coffee shop or a restaurant. Right. There seems to be no guarantee, really, that this establishment will not be focused on drinking, even though I accept that the applicant is suggesting that there will be a coffee shop operation during the day till the later, till 5 or 6. But nevertheless, there will be still a licence under this application given to support the other hours in that situation. So although they say that there won't be drinks, alcohol served during the day, there will still be a licence for that given the terms of this application. There is a potential in that case, we feel, of disruptive behaviour, and I know that the applicants have given us reassurance. Many staff on duty, particularly at the weekend, which we appreciate that information. But nevertheless, there is a potential for disruptive behaviour that may spill out into the outside of the premises, giving considerable impact on those residents living very close and nearby. I'm sure you would agree with that. It has a massive impact on people living nearby and in the wider community. And in terms, it doesn't reach that very important objective of the prevention of a public nuisance. When considering the opening hours, which I understand is going to be from 8:30 through to 11 every day, but you have suggested, as it says in the licence, the alcohol from 11. I understand that you now wish to just operate a coffee shop during the day. I understand that. With recorded music and with weekend live music, and I know that's a question that's been raised, that you are happy to remove that, and that will be considered, that remove the live music component, and I think that will be considered, obviously. When considering nearby licensed premises, which I think it's important to do, of Andre's, for example, which is opposite this premises, and the tapas room, both restaurants are not open every day, and they do not have extended hours. And it's not surprising because they're operating in a very quiet, densely populated residential area. There is a premise premises down on the other side of the road, further down Banks Road, called The Look. This is a licensed cafe, and it is open 9:30 to 6. I'm not sure whether they don't serve alcoholic drink during the day, but they're certainly, it seems, licensed to do so from my sort of brief understanding of this. They do operate the cafe menu, but they're just open on a couple of evenings at other times until about 9 or 10 in the evening for evening meals. So that they seem to manage really well, and there are residents living above the premises. But the hours of operation are restricted there, and there is also a couple of days when I believe they're not open. Presently, I have to say, it's reported from residents living above the premises that recorded music can be heard in the apartment at this present moment. I know you're not operating a full service, but even I think you're suggesting you might consider soundproofing. However, at the present moment, they can still hear recorded music in the apartments above. And they raised an issue of the coffee filters used to knock out the used coffee. That banging can be heard in the apartments above. So we feel that recorded music should be restricted, possibly till 6 p.m. And maybe, that has been raised, locked sound limiters could be fitted to the speakers, together with sound absorbing mounted brackets, but I'm not sure whether this applies in this case as to if that is appropriate. Live music, that I know you've touched on, given the particular size of the venue, the construction of the building, would create considerable and significant nuisance, and particularly would have a significant impact not only on the elderly residents above, but also to the wider community. But I understand that is that you have offered to remove that, which I guess that will be considered by the licensing committee. The floor downstairs is hard also. There is no soft carpet covering, and that could be fitted to absorb, obviously at a cost to you, some of the people noise, the movement of people that obviously, and sounds that people obviously generate there. Outside the premises, people would not be allowed, I feel, to congregate, as has been raised. It isn't an adequate space outside. It's a narrow pavement, really. Broader than most, but it's still narrow, and congregation of people outside totally would not satisfy the noise nuisance objective. And as you've raised, that smoking would be limited to a number outside, which is a good thing, but not close to residential windows, to try and eliminate noxious odours, which also comes under the terms of that objective. Air conditioning units and odour extractors should not be close to residents' windows due to the constant hum. I understand there is an air conditioning unit that was there from the previous owners, previous tenants of the premises, but that can create quite significant noise, particularly outside, and can sort of resonate into the residential properties above. And I know Mr. Dalgleish will talk about sound assessments, and it is essential that and this has been touched on, an assessment is taken from the apartments themselves in order to gather really accurate information when the usual activities, when we return to usual times, that should most definitely be carried out. And the information should be communicated with the residents that will most impact on. With regard to the objective of crime and disorder, there is a history here of underage drinking in the area, but it has involved in the past off licences, and the police are aware of this and have engaged with enforcement. However, this might occur again into the future, because the area is known for that, and it may draw people of a particular age to the area. There's also an issue of antisocial behaviour that is intermittent, but also may happen, we hope not, but occur into the future. But the police are very aware, and there is a very good community engagement with this, we work very closely with the police to try and significantly address this. But nevertheless, specified age is very important from the consumption of alcohol on the premises, but the drink is accompanying food, which is the impression that we're getting from other sources, as I've expressed. I wondered if a booking system could operate in the evening. So there's a sort of management of the arrival and the leaving in customers more effectively, so people book for food in the evening in the premises. And I think this is working towards cutting down on noise and disruption, rather than just allowing a large group, 30, to leave the premises. I think a booking system of table booking would help to eliminate some of that. Public safety has been raised here. There is a distinct problem with parking, is a problem in this area. It is limited, and people are inclined to double park, thus creating a road safety issue as well as a public safety issue. And with the lots of movement of vehicles arriving and leaving and so on, and private vehicles, it is important that that is considered. And incidentally, at the rear of the premises, which I mentioned before, it's important that that rear premises isn't used for parking, because if it's blocked, then the access to garages and entrances to the properties is restricted, and also that has a safety aspect as well, in terms of emergency vehicles having access to the rear of the premises. So public safety as well is there's an urgent fire assessment really to cover the whole building. I know the application states that the assessment has done on the premises, but it has been raised by one of the residents that this an assessment must be made, and I know that the applicants are in agreement to allow this to happen. An assessment of fire risk to the residents, particularly living above these premises, is important. And that fire assessment should be available and communicated to them, so that they can be reassured that measures have been taken to address any of their concerns here. So there's also the protection of children from harm, and we need to protect children from any disruptive behaviour that might be displayed as a result of excessive drinking of alcohol. And this we are particularly concerned about, and it needs to be carefully considered. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone would like to speak to me about these.
I can't hear him. He's on mute.
Chair, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry, Warren and Jamie. I want you to ask questions if you need to of the councillor who's just spoken. I don't want you to make statements because you'll be able to, anything you want to say, you mention to say later. Are there any questions you may want to ask?
No, there's no questions of the councillor.
Okay. Margaret O'Donnell, just to keep this tidy, and we'll have the two councillors together. Can you read out Jeff Green, the other local councillor's statement, please?
Yes, Chair, I can do that now, yes. So this is from Councillor Jeff Green, who, as said, has given his apologies today. May I first thank the members of the panel for accepting this statement. I very much hoped I could be present at this meeting to relay my comments personally, but unfortunately a medical appointment at the same time prevents me, for which I apologise. I am making this representation on the grounds of preventing public nuisance, particularly to the elderly residents, Mr and Mrs Totty, who reside directly above the premises and have done very contentedly and without issue for the last 14 years. If this application is granted in its current form, I am in no doubt of the considerable intolerable harm this will do to the mental and physical well-being of Mr and Mrs Totty. I am particularly concerned about the detrimental effects the stated operating hours and associated activities, including live music, will have on the amenity they currently enjoy within their own flat, which they rarely leave. Indeed, for a significant part of the last 12 months, they have remained within the confines of their flat shielding. It behoves members to use all their knowledge and experience to come to a successful outcome with this application. I would ask you to do all that you can to prevent unnecessary public nuisance to residents, but also enable the business to operate in an appropriate manner, given the particular residential setting described. Given the particular circumstances of this year and the fact a great number of our elderly residents have been shielded,
I don't know if you can hear us, Margaret, but you're frozen.
sorry, I had a break on my connection then?
You froze for about 5. Just go back a couple of sentences.
Okay. Given the particular circumstances of this year and the fact a great number of our elderly residents have been shielding, I would also like to raise the issue that the current way of notifying residents of an application by way of a display of an advert in the premises window perhaps isn't as effective as it could be. I wonder if the committee and the licensing department may consider more appropriate and effective notification measures to nearby local residents to facilitate early conversations between applicants and residents, so a satisfactory outcome can be reached by all parties being given ample time to communicate. Once again, thank you for accepting my statement and I wish you well in your endeavours.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, boys, you can't ask him questions because he's not here. So we'll go on to the licensing panel. And I'd like to ask Councillor Wright a question. If you can, you go off, Margaret, and Alison come back on again. Councillor Wright.
Yes. Hi.
From your statement that you made, are you wishing for the application not to go ahead at all, or are you open to the panel looking at putting conditions on?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, and I think Mr. Totty, who is the resident who lives above, is not taking issue with the coffee shop element. I think they, they would be happy with a coffee shop. That is not, I know the applicants have a successful coffee shop in Heswell. I think there is real concern with regards to the alcohol element of this and what that means, and I hope that came over in my statement. So it's a difficult one, this, isn't it, to get it right in balance. I think the hours that have been published are far too long, and I hope that came over. I think that restrictions could be placed on that.
Before we go down the whole application, Councillor Wright, could you just tell us whether you are open to it to go ahead with conditions on, or are you totally opposed to it? That's all we want to know. Because you did cover everything in your statement. I did, yes. You just want to know the feeling of the residents and yourself.
The feeling of the residents, yes. Well, as I say, it's not the coffee shop element; it's the alcohol element. So take that as you will.
So you would say you're opposed. Okay, thank you. Do the other councillors want to ask the other councillor any questions?
If I may, Chair, I'd like to ask, in the comments that you made, you were saying the problems in relation to antisocial behaviour and alcohol was in relation to underage drinkers, and that was because of the local off licences.
Yes, that's correct.
So you're making a statement about the larger area. You're not making a statement.
It's a larger area, really. The sort of conditions outside are there. There's underage drinking, and there is an element of antisocial behaviour.
And yes,
but I was considering that, if this was more of a control, that's why I was suggesting that if the premises was really much more a focus on food element with accompanying drink, it sort of manages that side of it really, and how it coordinates with the wider picture really. That was what I was trying to get over. And also, fairly controlled with sort of booking for tables and so on and so forth.
Yeah, understand all that.
Yeah. That's what I was really getting at.
I understand all that, but you're trying to throw something else into the equation that's not there. The young gentlemen have stated in their accompanying statements that they are looking to be a higher end sort of facility that's been allowed into the area. So that would hopefully detract from that side of it. And given the question is that, antisocial behaviour is one of the reasons, the prevention of public nuisance, the main people who respond to that is the police. And you will have known that in the report itself, the police have no comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Greaney.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Wright, for a very full representation for your residents, and you managed to address all four licensing objectives, but the one I'd like to focus on is your comments on one of the licensing objectives, which is the prevention of antisocial behaviour. Is you say there's a potential in the grant of this licence for disruptive behaviour. As that could apply to every restaurant and bar on the Wirral, what specifically have you evidence to say that the grant of a licence to this premises is a potential disruptive behaviour? What evidence do you have for that?
Because I think, rightly or wrongly, there's a perception that it's more of a drinks focused, according to the evidence that I gave to you through the perception given on social media, where there's an emphasis on that. The design of the bar is very much, most of the a large proportion of the premises is taken up by a large bar, and there's small tables and so on and so forth. So that was what I was saying really there.
Okay, well, we'll discuss that later when we come, but that's maybe an assumption. There's no real evidence for that. But
there isn't real evidence, no. But it is likely where there is a focus and a perceived focus on a drinking establishment, that, if people have a loss of drink, it is likely there is a potential, put it that way, which I did say, of destructive behaviour that could possibly spill out into the outside as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask you something? You know, when you say a large bar,
Yeah.
have you seen the photographs in the plant? There are only 4 stools at the bar, and the rest of the seating area is 23 around the premises on the area. So you said it's more of a bar than a sitting area. There's actually 23 seating areas and only 4 at the bar.
Yeah, but it is quite a large bar area, isn't it? That covers the main side of the premises, and it seems to the design seems to suggest that there's a strong emphasis on the drink side, but it should really be focused on food with accompanying drinks.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Have the 2 councillors had enough questions now? We now ask our legal advisor if he wants to ask any questions.
Thank you, Jay. Just one question. Obviously, there are other premises in the area, and there's already been mention of one directly opposite the road, and where there is residents residing above that premises. I mean, I know we're talking at different premises here, but have you had any complaints from residents living above premises that are offering a similar type venue in this area?
In the Hoylake area, yes, where there's a similar situation where premises are operating with residents living above. And I won't name it, but we've had lots and lots of complaints.
But I'm talking about West Kirby.
West Kirby, right. Well, there is concern about the outside area. You see, the premises opposite Andre's is a very different concept. That is a restaurant where people book and are coming and going and so on and so forth on a sort of regular basis, but not all, it's a different concept, very much substantial food. There is a bar at Andre's, of course there is, but it's predominantly a restaurant service where people are booking and having a substantial meal. They also have an outside area. I have had complaints of noise emanating from the outside area, even there, yes. And also, I think the hours are more restricted as well. The premises aren't open all day. And there is sort of obviously a build-up of customers into the evening, but they are engaged with providing very substantial 3-course meals. So it's very different. It's not sort of comparing like with like, really. But yes, the outdoor space, there is definitely noise impact from the outside space from opposite, because it's been raised with me.
Okay, has that been raised with the local authority, the licensing authority?
No, not licensing authority, but just me as a local councillor with regard to that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Jay.
Can I just say, Ken, that there's been mention of Tansky's, which is quite away from there, and also Andre's. There's been complaints. Yesterday, we checked through licensing how many complaints there were, and there weren't any made to the authority. Just to clarify your question. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. That's the only question I wanted to raise.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I'm happy to continue, as I'm sure most people... Is anyone desperate to have a break for 10 minutes? Because we're all disappearing. I mean, apart from the 3 councillors, we're on screen all the time. It is better if we can continue. Is anyone desperate for health reasons? They've got to have a 10-minute break or anything? Is everyone happy to continue? Because we're now 2 hours into the meeting. Okay, well, we will continue. Councillor Mitchell's had his cup of tea, so he's all right. I will now invite Mr. Dalglish, the applicant's solicitor. So if you can go off, please, Alison, and the 2 applicants go off. on the screen, and Mr. Dalglish is now going to represent the residents, and you will be asked, the applicants, to ask him any questions you may have from what he's going to say. So beware. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dalglish.
Thank you. I don't bite. Thank you all. If I may touch very briefly on planning for a moment, because that was mentioned. Planning is obviously, there is an interlink with licensing, but it is a separate regime. And it is not a stopgap to activities that may leak in licensing. And we have an example that I'll come to specific to West Kirby, but you know, pret-a-mangers across the country, appreciate they're not licensed, but often operate as de facto A3 restaurants, but have A1 use. And if you have enough turnover with in-house dining, then you can have pure vertical drinking later on. That's the Thai Square business model. So it's obviously probative, but it's not the stopgap, and licensing sits in its own realm to look at this on its own 2 feet. We've had a number of mentions by the applicants. You know, affable young guys, great business, lots of energy and spirit, but no one can deny that they are decidedly inexperienced when it comes to operating licensed premises, and I'm afraid that shines through. To add that, they have given out mixed messages and ducked awkward issues. As a simple example, Mrs. Webster, local foster carer, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Totty, virtually had to beat a door to Mr. McElhatton to speak to him about the application, only to be told on the phone, yes, cocktails are going to be an integral part of the business, and he wouldn't want his grandparents living above the venue. We've sent a number of emails to the applicants to try to discuss points, to assist the committee ahead of the hearing with reducing issues and agreeing conditions, which we're glad to see them being agreed now, but it's coming rather late in the day, and it demonstrates that inexperience. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that they may well be great operators, but we need to look to the possibility that somebody else might go in there, and that's about ensuring that a particular kind of activity is fixed. And clearly, in their minds, they have had a bar operation. The Wirral Building Control Register shows the sign-off as being from retail to bar. The planning application advice is for a drinking establishment. Why? If you ask simply, can we operate as a restaurant and bistro? Very simple, Class E, off you go. The plan, as noted, has a substantial bar. It has a beer cellar where there could be a bigger kitchen. If they wanted to ensure the covers that they propose to do, they could have had a bigger kitchen. They've already put, we understand, beer pumps in readiness. And we agree with your calculation as to the number of covers as 27. It would have been a squeeze to have 40 in. That would only have been vertical drinkers. I won't dwell too much on the sound assessment, but they've repeatedly offered to provide that. We've chased it and chased it and chased it. It arrived this week. And that may well be disorganisation, but it's indicative, I'm afraid. And it's important as well that it refers to a number of elements that were not in their application. It's talking about it assumes customers will be sitting and eating. Well, I think we're agreed now that there's going to be a substantial meal condition or something of that ilk, not just available, but you have to be eating food to have alcohol. It refers to a switch to alcohol service after 5 o'clock. That's not what they've applied for. This has a kind of cavalier feel to it, and that's that drives anxieties and tensions. I'm not aware of any locals who haven't, without really trying to get hold of them, managed to speak to them. Holding a premises license is a privilege. It's a valuable privilege, a right that quite rightly comes with serious duties and responsibilities. And Wirral licensing policy underlines that. Paragraph 6.4. The expectation is that applicants will demonstrate high management standards, knowledge of best practice, understanding of the legal requirements of operating a licensed premises. By their own admission, they're not there. The case I was going to mention, and I won't spend a lot of time because I sent round some details as part of the pack, is Pre-Bar. That was granted a licence on, it's 15 Grange Road in 2007. Remarkably similar facts, I'm afraid. The venue was described as a bistro. Young, inexperienced applicants said, as can be seen in the minutes, it's page 136 of the bundle, about halfway down, they'll be providing relaxing atmosphere with background music, substantial food, about 30-40% would be alcohol. Venue had been a quiet coffee shop beneath residential premises in a building designed and built for retail with residential above. Similar hours to the ones proposed here were granted, along with conditions that included reference to no noise nuisance, wind down period, doors and windows being kept closed, a drugs policy. The venue swiftly descended after a transfer into a vertical drinking establishment. Utter misery for the residents for 18 months. It eventually was sorted with an injunction and revocation. Now, the main focus of concern for residents is around public nuisance. And Wirral's own licensing policy obviously tells us what we're looking at. Public nuisance is not narrowly defined. That's hope and glory. It's clear law that unreasonable disturbance to a few people, even early in the evening, 6 p.m. in that case, and even in a single building, amounts to public nuisance. And the statutory guidance states at paragraph 216 that it encompasses the reduction of the living and working amenity and environment of other persons living and working in the area of the licensed premises. Paragraph 630 of Wirral licensing policy, the licensing authority must consider the impact of the proposed activities on people who have to live, work and sleep in the vicinity. It will look at proximity of residential accommodation, proposed hours, steps taken or proposed to be taken to prevent noise and vibration, including installation of soundproofing. We know that's not quite there on this. Acoustic lobbies proposed and not accepted. Sound limitation devices, that needs to be a proper sound limitation device. Steps that are taken to prevent disturbance by customers arriving at or leaving the premises. We know that the application hasn't yet formulated a dispersal policy. Use of smoking areas, we've only heard about that today. Steps taken or proposed to be taken by the applicant to ensure staff leave the premises quietly. Again, no idea. Whether a dispersal policy has been prepared, it hasn't. And licence holders are expected to carefully risk assess and make necessary improvements to the premises and to the operation to prevent public nuisance. Officers may give them some guidance, but that's the duty of the applicant. So is there public nuisance here? Is there a risk? Environmental Health have not put in a representation, but if that were the end of the matter, the Act and the guidance would have said so. Unlike the police, who are conferred with special weight. I mean, it's hard, to be frank, to see that the applicant's submissions that were looked at that closely by Environmental Health. There are a multitude of errors in it, and I can only assume that is what Mr. Jockin meant by it goes as far as it goes. But that still leaves the prospect of public nuisance as a very real risk. And Mr. Jockin has said to both Mr. Vivian and my parents that it's okay, the licence can of course be reviewed if there's a problem later on. That's not how it works. That's not the test. We know from Daniel Thwaite's case that the committees would look at a wide-ranging way at the material that is logically probative. It does not have to be, you do not have to have hard evidence now. It has to be logically probative. The pre-application planning advice is instructive. Running as a cafe, so page 2 of that advice, running as a cafe, restaurant or bistro should be where alcohol is served with meals. We agree. Concern is raised as to the close proximity to residential property. We agree. never mind music, simply operating as a bar into the night runs a noted risk of generating, and I quote, excessive noise to the detriment of residential amenity. Even restricting the hours is likely to cause unacceptable levels of noise and disturbance to neighbouring properties. This is an experienced planning officer saying there is a risk here. Interested parties are in any case given an integral part in the licensing process precisely because they are, above all else, have a deep expertise of the locality and the likely issues that may arise. That is not always expressed in the clearest or calmest way by residents, but the substance is still there, and precise knowledge here is important. There may be a thought process that pre-bar was an unfortunate one-off. We say it's a salutary lesson where young, inexperienced operators look to open in a location not designed for it and show a propensity to hit bare minimum legal requirements, duck difficult issues. Alarm bells should be going off. They are already not at those high standards referred to in the Wirral licensing policy. This is a building that was constructed for shop or offices, so 9 to 5, with residential above. A wholly different set of parameters come into play when you have a bustling restaurant come drinking establishment running with music well into the evening and the early part of the night. The landlord's not under a duty here, and in any case that's the Hodsons. They own the freehold. Music is audible now in the flat above. We know they turn the music up at the end of the shift. The banging of the coffee knock is readily audible now. Problematic structure-borne noise issues are readily apparent. Complaints have been made and aired here on the construction noise, and they have ploughed on. The vicinity is also important. I'm grateful for Councillor Wright for outlining some of the nearby premises. There's retail on both sides of the road opposite Lifestyle Outlets and House of Hilbury, both shut at 5 p.m. Nearby cafe diagonally opposite 130 Banks Road shuts at 4 p.m. There are 3 nearby sit-down restaurants that we've referred to, Andre's, Royal Bengal and Tapas Kitchen. Even the Bargain Booze, which is open 7 days a week, shuts at 9 p.m. The venue would be an outlier, the only vertical drinking on licensed premises open this late in this locality that effectively quietens down in the early evening. When I'm at my parents' place, which is just a block away as the Americans would say, in normal times after 6 p.m, I'd go right down the road, so towards the one stop, to have a sit-down meal or go to the offie. I go left and walk some way down Banks Road towards D Lane and Grange Road to go for a beer with friends. The conditions have now been proposed. I hope, if I understood them well, but in the application there were no conditions that would ensure this would remain a little cafe restaurant. A bar operator could drive a coach and horses through these, and there's real evidence that that was in people's minds. Granting this without further intervention would, in our submission, amount to rolling the dice. I would ask at this stage if Mr. Vivian could add a few comments, and then I'll quickly wrap up, if I may, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Chair. From my point of view, it might be possible for a daytime use to operate underneath residential flats. You know, we see that in other locations. The problem with this application was initially the limited information, and then the more we were digging, the more we found out about this site and the fact that acoustically this is a very weak building. Back in 2006, this was a single-storey building. It was a single-storey retail shop. And works were carried out to add the flats on top. Now, they were done by adding steel stanchions in the building and then a concrete hollow core floor and structure. Now, that creates a building that's very, very rigid. It's not like an old red brick building or sandstone building. It's a very tightly locked together building. The applicant's own noise consultants in their report, and you'll have to excuse me because I don't have a numbered bundle that covers that, but that's the sound testing report, which was, didn't cite any licensing criterion. It just looks at this from the planning point of view and cites the National Planning Policy Framework. But in that report, it notes that Section 5, it's observed that there are multiple penetrations made to the plasterboard ceiling for service hatches, lights and mechanical ventilation. It again notes at 7.1 there are multiple penetrations that will cause actual acoustic performance to be lower than their calculated performance, than the modelled performance. And of course, this is the thing that doesn't give us any comfort. This report should be here telling us this is a good building, it's acoustically robust, and this doesn't. They carry out some calculations. I'm not going to be pedantic about their calculation methodology. It is what it is, but it was a generous methodology, and it assumed people talking very quietly across the restaurant, and certainly assumed that there was no music in the restaurant. And it says at paragraph 6.3 of the applicant's own noise assessment, the report states, it should be noted that our calculations, the target, does not mean that all LAF max noise, now that's kind of impact noise, or low frequency noise, so that would be sort of bass noise, will be inaudible. So their own expert assessment says even if the ceiling didn't have all these penetrations in it, even if it did perform as quite optimistically modelled in their calculations, you would still hear activity downstairs from the commercial unit. And of course that seems to be the evidence that's already been put in front of us, that we can hear the coffee porter filters. It's a very common problem with cafes, that knock, 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 as a barista, cleans out the coffee filter and grinds the next coffee. They can hear that. They can also hear the site radio from people playing music while they're working down there at the moment. That's an indication the building's acoustically weak. That's very good evidence that the building is acoustically weak. Properly soundproofed, you would have to clad all the steel structures, line the walls, but it's possible, but that's certainly not this building as it stands. And then that's reiterated, I think, in the planning pre-application consultation that James has already read out. The conclusion of your planning officer as of last year is that the planning department will be unlikely to support this use. That restricting the hours of the use of the premises may not be sufficient to prevent an unacceptable level of noise and disturbance to neighbouring properties. So there we have it. Having dug deep and asked for some information, we've got it. It's not a great building, and it's not a great building that would be able to contain noise in its current form. And I think that's probably it. I think I can hand back to James. But if you have any technical questions, please do ask me.
Don't disappear, because the applicants may want to ask you a question. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
You can go off the screen now. Solicitor.
Okay.
Mr. Begley.
That's me.
You're gonna finish off.
Wrap
now,
up. Yeah. I'll be as quick as I can.
No, take it however long you want, because this is your time.
Thank you, Chair. So there is a clear risk of public nuisance arising in connection with licensable activities here, and the licensing authority's duties are firmly engaged. It must look to appropriate steps to prevent that happening. Paragraph 636 of the Wirral licensing policy, the approach of the licensing authority will be one of prevention, and that is necessarily looking forward. As one example was given, I don't need the house to burn down to know that it's good to have sprinklers. And as the government's licensing webpage notes on the Daniel Thwaites case, it is sometimes misconstrued that decisions must be based on real evidence and that conditions cannot be imposed until problems have actually occurred. This is wrong. The purpose of the Act is to prevent problems before happening. And as Professor Manchester in Alcohol and Entertainment Licensing Law notes, where there is evidence of whatever its nature which supports steps to being taken to promote the licensing objectives, the authority is justified in taking those steps, and indeed should do. And whenever there's activity, licensable activity going on, there is the duty to look at conditions. and they don't necessarily need to be specific to, say, alcohol. We have dispersal policies for pure on licenses. We have control of smokers. We have control of music even in licensed premises where they don't have regulated entertainment. So what can be done to prevent a public nuisance from occurring? The steps must be specific to the application and location. Falling back on standard conditions and the like is to be avoided. That's paragraph 10.10 of the national guidance. A bespoke approach is the correct approach. We say that this application is a bit of a dog's breakfast imbued with cavalier attitude by inexperienced applicants, that it ought to be refused. Everybody go away, come back with a revised application that is readily doable. There remains time. It's almost certain that venues serving alcohol on the premises will not be able to open in any material sense before April. I have no clients in that space thinking beyond May, so May is the likely date. They don't propose off sales and would not benefit from the off sales statutory relaxation. There is time. But if you're nevertheless minded to grant, then what controls could be considered? Hours are one mechanism and have been mentioned. What goes on and can go on in ordinary daytime hours is clearly very different to the evening and early night. Peg the premises to the hours in keeping with the area and cafe. We suggest 5 p.m. closing. Do not give them default longer hours on New Year's Eve and Boxing Day. Operate well. Run the occasional longer night via 10. Most operators do that sort of thing, particularly for New Year's Eve. For such inexperienced operators, do that well, and no doubt they will have the hard evidence to justify more generous hours on a permanent basis. And there are, of course, conditions. There have been plenty of good intentions, but good intentions don't cut the mustard. Many of the terms used are incredibly imprecise. Short acoustic performances, I appreciate they're saying they won't do that now. Low key, reasonable volume, will not be audible. Mr. Vivian mentioned the case of Developing Retail Limited. In that case, a condition that said all noise arising from regulated entertainment at the premises shall be inaudible 1 metre outside any noise sensitive premises. Sounds good? Held to be too imprecise to be enforceable. We have even less precision here, but Mr. Vivian has put forward conditions that do meet the requisite standard. Clearly the two relating to after 7 o'clock would not apply if cafe hours are granted. And clearly under section 18 of the Act, the Licensing Act, the committee's remit is wide in this respect, and as I've sort of touched on, encompasses the promotion of all the licensing objectives whenever that duty is engaged. And that's the end of my submission. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
Well, it's the applicants who are going to ask you, but I was going to ask you, like I asked Alison Wright, what was your view? But you answered that in about 3 paragraphs ago, and you said you don't think we should allow this one.
But I do think there's a route map here if it wasn't allowed.
Okay. Mr. Norton and Mr. Hatton, is it? Can you come back on the screen, please? The applicants. Right. There's been a lot of things levelled at you here, but this you can answer those when you have your winding up session. Okay. Are there any questions? You're on mute. Are there any questions you want to ask Mr. Dalglish, the solicitor?
With regards to questions, no, we don't.
Okay, that was simple. Have the licensing panel got any questions? Could I ask a question? You know, you mentioned there was no contact between the residents and the applicants throughout the course of this. Were they not aware of or did they see the email which was for contacting on the window?
Indeed, and I've tried emailing that and didn't get any responses. My point was that people like Mrs. Webster had to try very hard to get hold of them. That was my only point. I'm not aware, and beyond that, I'm happy to be wrong, I'm not aware of sort of impromptu and obviously in COVID, secure environment gathering.
Okay. How did you know there were beer pumps in the cellar?
That's Denise Roberts has observed that. The one of my the people I'm representing from the Lifestyle Cafe opposite Lifestyle Outlet.
It's just me being pedantic. How does she know? Was she being in the cellar?
No, she saw them being delivered to be put in.
Okay. Well, I haven't got any more questions.
Can I just have, Chair, if I may, just clarification. It was a comment from Mr. Vivian. He was saying that when the building was extended, they used structural steel
in 2006
and solid concrete flooring. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor. It's hollow core concrete planks, so they sit hollow core slabs that sit on a beam structure. I'm guessing you have construction knowledge.
I wrote it down, you see, and that's what threw me, because you said solid concrete flooring. I understand where it's coming from. Okay,
is this where they put the runs in and they drop the blocks in?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the construction method.
Yeah, home design. That's nice.
Okay, thank you.
There's no questions from the councillors now then. Ken Abrams, have you got any questions?
Just a couple. Just to clarify, Mr. Dalglish, obviously, you know, there is you mentioned planning, but would have to be a separate planning permission if this was deemed to be a drinking establishment. And I know you made reference to another premises, which obviously we have to look at each and every premises independently and individually, and there were circumstances. I mean, I was the legal advisor at that previous hearing, which goes back to 2007/2009, when obviously the guidance would have been different at that time. You know, the legislation and the regulations may have been different or differently interpreted. You've mentioned Thwaites, which obviously initially came to this panel initially, and both myself and Mrs. O'Donnell were involved in that particular case. But in relation to the issue of planning, obviously a lot of what you've indicated were criticisms levelled at the nature of the application as initially put. The application has changed somewhat during these proceedings and during this hearing, and a lot of indications have been given by the two applicants in relation to what they're proposing to do. Are you saying, and I know that your parents have initially in their representation suggested conditions which are similar to other residents who have suggested similar conditions, and indeed are aligned in a lot of ways to what Mr. Vivian has indicated in his submission. So are you saying that effectively with conditions, appropriate conditions to be considered by members, that there is an agreement, or there would be an agreeable view to an application proceeding?
I can see that, particularly with the points taken today. I agree. I think with the appropriate conditions and the appropriate hours, I can see that as something, and hence my stance that if the committee is minded, then we would be on a similar page with that. So I hope, does that answer the question?
Well, it does, but you mentioned the hours, and it was one thing that I wasn't clear about, because you were sort of looking to peg back the hours, and you made reference to I think to the cafe hours, or the coffee provision hours, and I was just a bit unclear as to, obviously we're talking about a bistro here now, not a drinking establishment, which would mean they wouldn't need any form of additional planning permission. So they are confined to the licensing objectives, etc. And are we talking? And they've referred to noise limiters. They've referred to reviewing the insulation of the flooring and taking on board what's been said by the residents and yourself. Are you saying that's not satisfactory from your perspective still?
I think that it rather depends, unfortunately, to give a bit of a fiddly answer. You know, if the noise limiter is one that's locked and not able to be changed simply, then that does satisfy in our view. And if there is, if it is conditioned that food must be served with alcohol, then yes, we do agree that meets the licensing objectives.
Okay. I mean, just the noise limiter, I appreciate. I mean, noise limiters would normally be imposed in premises where there are a drinking establishment or a nightclub or something like that. I mean, I don't know whether you've had experience about, in relation to your time within licensing, to have noise limiters at bistros or resident or a restaurant. You know, and that would be something that would be perhaps out of the norm, as it were, given what's been said now this morning by the applicants.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen that, and they're a few £100s. So,
well, I think you might be talking a few £1,000s in some respects, depending on
sometimes, but it's certainly not an insurmountable point if it gave us surety on that particular licensing objective.
Okay. Right, and just Mr. Vivian, has he actually been in the premises himself as part of this assessment that he's done? I mean, he's referred to assumptions in the sound costing report by the applicant, but obviously a series of conditions at the end of his report, and I'm just wondering what access he's had to make the judgments that he's made.
I'll answer that directly. I haven't been to the site, and I have had to dig around and find the original planning file, look at the construction drawings, and assess the building. I'm not sure if the applicant's own sound report is based on a site visit. I couldn't find any identification of that.
The applicant's theirs did not go on site either.
No. So we're working for best available information to us at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's. I just wanted to get that clarified. Right. Okay. So there is a mind then to actually your views, Mr. Daglish, in relation to the application could be acceptable, but with the appropriate conditions in place.
Agreed.
I think Mr. Daglish said at the end of his statement there could be a pathway.
I think his pathway may be looking at you, not maybe I'm assuming this, but I think the pathway Mr. Daglish was referring to was not necessarily making a determination.
Giving them limited hours and seeing how they behave, and then see what we could do in the future. There is an app on the phone, isn't there, that you're going to use for the sound?
Yeah.
So that could be blocked from other staff fiddling with the sound and turning it up, couldn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just sorry one check in relation to the hours?
Before you do, Ken.
Yeah.
The applicants want to ask Mr. Vivian anything?
No.
Okay, sorry, go on, Ken.
No, I was just going to clarify very quickly, Mr. Daglish. You mentioned about restricting hours. What are you proposing, or what are you suggesting?
Well, you said 6 o'clock, didn't you?
I'd said 6 o'clock, but I proposed that on the basis of a cafe, but I'm not set in stone. And restaurant hours, you could well see 7, 8, 9.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Of the applicants, you finished with Mr. Daglish. No more questions, as we said.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any local residents who want to make a statement, not going over the same old ground that